Hey guys, Haz here at Shield Canine, and welcome to our online learning course. So my goal with this online training is to provide the most upfront and organic training experience possible. And by that I mean no smoke and mirrors, no fake stuff, no nonsense, not holding anything back, showing you from 0 to 100 how to train a dog in whatever it is that you're shooting to train a dog. So we're gonna have modules on everything from pet training to behavior training to tracking to competition obedience to protection work. We're going to have a lot of content on here. And if you follow me on YouTube, and if you don't, give me a follow right now, you know that I'm a very no-nonsense kind of guy. I have a very no-holds-barred training approach. I tell it the way it is, and I don't try to put unicorn dresses on things. I try to give you guys the straight skinny on everything. So my training course is going to be no different. Now, like anything that's good, we understand why it is that what we do works. There's a lot of trainers out there, they might be able to train a dog, they couldn't explain to you how to train a dog. They couldn't explain why what they do works. They tend to cloak it in kind of what I call voodoo verbiage, where they're talking about being the alpha or relationship and this and that. I'm going to explain to you guys what we do, how we do it, and why it works. So in my opinion, before you ever embark on any endeavor, you have to have a rough understanding as to what you're doing and why you're doing it. Don't just pick up a leash and some treats and an e-collar and a prong collar or a stick, whatever it is that you're doing. Don't just pick stuff up and start doing things. You need to understand why it works. Now, I already have a lecture on how dogs learn, and I strongly suggest you watch that lecture. You know what? I insist you watch it. You have to watch that lecture. If you want to really understand what we're doing and how we're doing it, and in my opinion, if you don't understand what we're doing and why what we're doing works, it's not going to be, there's a freaking fly there. If you don't understand what we're doing and why it works, you are going to be half the trainer that you could be. So even if it's difficult, even if theory isn't something that's easy for you, get off your lazy ass, or actually get on your lazy ass, turn on the computer, sit down, get some potato chips, some coffee, whatever it is you need to get through it, and watch it, understand it, absorb it, so that you can be a better trainer to your dog. Because like it or not, I am not the dog trainer. You are now the dog trainer. If you're watching this, you have decided to become a dog trainer. Even if it's just for your dog, you need to know these things. So don't be lazy. Okay guys, so I have broken the training process down into 4 primary phases. We've got the learning phase, the conditioning phase, the intermittent phase, and the proofing phase. And I'm going to try to explain these things as simply as possible for you. The learning phase is showing, all right? If you have a new dog or a new puppy that doesn't understand something, whether you're teaching the dog to play dead, whether you're teaching the dog to heel next to you or to come on command, you must show the dog what these things are before you progress. So you can be using food, you can be using leash pressure, usually it's a combination of both, but you're showing the dog what things are, okay? Now progressing into the second phase of learning or training is the conditioning phase. Now the conditioning phase is where I'm showing the dog how to respond to the aids that I'm using to get to where I need him or her to be. Now I know that was a big mouthful. I'm going to try to explain it. So whether you're using the leash, whether you're using the prong collar, the e-collar, whether you're using food, usually again it's a combination of all these things, you are conditioning the dog to respond to each command with the use of these aids. And you're helping the dog get to the various positions and places that he or she needs to be with the aids. So think of conditioning as adding aids to the behavior, all right? And showing the dog the correct response to those aids, all right? Leash, e-collar, prong collar, food, ball, whatever. The intermittent phase is where we begin to wean the dog off the aids. So for instance, if I have a dog on an e-collar or on a leash, and I've been using it in the conditioning phase to reinforce the sit, to reinforce the down, and now in the intermittent phase, Sometimes I'm using the leash and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm using the e-collar and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm rewarding the dog at the end with food and sometimes I'm not. This is the intermittent phase. And this is where we begin to show the dog the possibility of working without an immediate reward, without the immediate assistance of aids to get to various positions or to perform various behaviors. So that is the intermittent phase of the training process. Now, the last phase, the proofing phase. This is the very important phase, and many people never make it to here properly because they stay forever in this place. Okay? And the proofing phase, we will show you how to correctly proof a dog. Whether you're preparing a dog for competition or whether you are preparing your dog just to be a good companion and perform off-leash obedience, the proofing phase is essential to your success. And this is where you're saying to the dog, there is no more aids, or at least there's very little aids. You must do it now, and you must do it under every circumstance. That's real training. That's where you're on the street texting on your phone, your dog walks next to you in the heel because you told him. That's where you put your dog in the down state and people are riding bikes and rollerblading past and a dog barks in his face and he remains in the down state. That's where you're in the competition and your dog is biting the helper and you tell him to out and he immediately outs, right? And waits for the next command or the next action from the helper. That is the result of correct proofing, all right? So the 4 phases of training are so essential, and we have broken down everything that we do into these 4 phases to help you achieve the success that we have achieved with the dogs that we've trained. All right, guys, now it's time to expand a little bit on the theory behind the practice. Now, again, I strongly recommend, no, I don't recommend, I make it mandatory that you go and watch that video, How Dogs Think and Learn, because it's really going to help you understand what it is that we're doing here. But I'm going to very quickly touch on reinforcers and punishers, because you really have to understand this. Reinforcement is anything that you use to create a behavior or to strengthen an existing behavior. Reinforcement can be divided into 2 subcategories, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement, the giving of something pleasing and desirable to the dog. Food, praise, toys, okay? These are some very easy examples. And negative reinforcement, creating discomfort to comfort, all right? Now, I'm going to use a human example just to help you guys. You get in your car, you don't put your seatbelt on, what do you hear? Ding, 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 click. You holster your seatbelt, which is the desired behavior of the car manufacturer and the government. You holster your seatbelt and that minor discomfort goes away. Using an example that everybody should know from dogs, your dog doesn't sit. You pull up on his collar, he's experiencing minor discomfort, he puts his butt on the ground, you stop pulling on his collar. You're using negative reinforcement to create or strengthen the behavior of sit, okay? Now, punishment. Anything aversive that the dog deems as aversive, it's important to understand that you do to create a reduction or removal within a specific behavioral contingency. So, for example, if your dog likes to bark a lot when you're not home and you put a bark collar on your dog and your dog barks and receives an unpleasant aversive consequence of an electric static shock and thus reduces or completely ceases to bark, right, or stops barking, I should say, this is an example of positive punishment. Now, punishers, just like reinforcers, can be divided into 2 categories. You have positive punishment, the application of something that the dog deems aversive for a specific behavioral contingency, whether it's barking, jumping on people, whatever it is you can think of, going in the garbage, okay? Or negative punishment, and that's basically withholding something that your dog really wants because the dog didn't offer you the correct behavior. So for instance, if I ask my dog to sit and he lay down and I have this treat that he really wants, and I say, sit, and then I only give him the treat when he sits, but I withheld the treat when he lay down, right, and he really wanted that treat, that's an example of negative punishment. So withholding something he wants until the desired behavior is offered, okay? So, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. Again, watch that video. Much more in depth and even more so than your typical, just talking a little bit about operant conditioning. There's a lot more to How Dogs Think and Learn than just those simple things. But I just want you guys to comprehend that and remember that and refresh you on that. So, it's not enough to know that reinforcers strengthen or create behavior and punishers reduce or remove behavior. You have to understand how dogs put 2 and 2 together. Right? Because we as human beings, we're very cerebral. all right? We see something and we generally understand it, all right? The easiest way for you to think about it, for those of you that are parents, if you've had a 2-year-old, you know that they struggle with the concept of behavior and consequence. They don't put 2 and 2 together. They don't put, well, mommy's upset because I broke the vase, okay? Or mommy's upset because I ran on the road. Especially when they're younger, when human children are young, this is the big problem with them, is they struggle with the understanding of what behavior yields what consequence. And they just kind of do things impulsively and they don't really kind of understand consequences. And as a parent, it's your job to communicate those consequences clearly, consistently, and in a manner that is fair to the developmental stage of the child. It's no different when you're training dogs, guys, okay? And dogs never get past, I would say, the average human toddler in terms of their understanding. And in some cases, they never even get there. So it's important that you understand that your dog doesn't necessarily put together his behavior and the consequences that occurred. Whether they're natural consequences, like environmental, like your dog pushes something over and it falls and crashes and scares the crap out of him, or a consequence that you applied for a behavior that the dog perform. So we always assume they know, and you shouldn't assume that. So for instance, if I'm giving my dog hot dogs because he comes when I call him, well, of course, he understands he gets a hot dog when he comes. Does he? Or does he think, well, I came, I looked at you, I wagged my tail, and I spun in a circle, and maybe I barked at you too, and then you gave me the hot dog. Which of those, like 5 or 6 things, yielded the hot dog? Not so clear, right? He barked at somebody, so I gave him a leash correction. Well, was it because I barked at the dog? Was it because I looked at the dog? Maybe the dog barked at me. Is that why I was corrected? Why did that aversive thing happen to me? Your dog doesn't necessarily identify automatically the specific behavioral contingency that yielded whatever consequence it was that occurred. So you have to think of it this way, okay? Behavior is neither good nor bad in your dog's mind. Now, consequences, of course, are good and bad, right? So your dog either finds them desirable or undesirable. So in order for your dog to put 2 and 2 together, what behavior yields what consequence, which is obviously going to be basically what training the dog is, you're going to use a system of communication to bridge the gap we call markers, okay? And markers help the dog put 2 and 2 together. So for instance, if I'm calling my dog and I'm trying to mark the correct behavior that the dog is offering, right? And I say, Fido, come. And Fido turns around and takes 1 step towards me. And I mark, right? I use a marker. I say, that's the right thing. It's basically like taking a picture of a specific behavior and saying, that thing you just did, that's why you're getting this hot dog. That thing you just did, that's why you're getting this leash correction or this e-collar correction or whatever kind of correction you're giving the dog. So markers basically help identify specific behavioral contingencies within a behavior chain or pattern that the dog is offering. And it gives you the ability to say to your dog, that thing that you just did, that is why you're getting this consequence, whether it's a good one or a bad one, okay? So for us, the markers that we use here in the training, okay? Positive reinforcement, okay, is we have 2 markers for positive reinforcement. We've got chip, okay? And chip basically is our marker for food, all right? But it can also be a marker for toys. I shouldn't say it's a marker for food. It's just a marker for positive reinforcement. You are getting something awesome, okay? Either food or a toy. There's really no other reason why we would say chip, okay? Now, I'm going to quickly talk about chip, okay? You see how it's written. A lot of people make the mistake of going chip, and they say it like that. They say it like you would read it, all right? It's important you say it like a sound your dog has never heard before. There is a debate in dog training. A lot of people say that mechanical markers are much more powerful than verbal markers, and I disagree. Okay, I just think that a lot of people really don't know how to use verbal markers, and that's why mechanical markers. And a mechanical marker, for those of you that don't know, is a clicker. Okay, it's an inanimate object. You push the button and it makes that noise. Okay, that click noise. And a lot of people say, well, my dog has a much better response to that noise. And it's just because I find that a lot of people struggle with tonality using a verbal marker. Okay, they kind of use the verbal marker like they're talking, chip. All right, or a lot of people like to use yes, so they go yes. And they feed the dog. And it's like, yeah, of course he's not responding the same, because that kind of just sounds like something that you're saying. Your dog hears you talk all the time. You want your mark for positive reinforcement and also for punishment to stand out like nothing your dog normally hears. So for me, when I use chip, I use it like chip. Okay, my dog does not hear anything like that unless he's going to be receiving some awesome, awesome stuff. Do not say chip unless you have food or unless you have a toy that your dog really desires. All right? Don't be a liar. You don't know how many times I get people coming in here. They did their first week of training. They come back the next week and I see them going chip, chip, chip. And like 3 times they said chip, they didn't give the dog 1 piece of food. They didn't give the dog anything. And of course, they're saying chip. And the dog's just like, ho hum, I don't care. Right? Because for him, it doesn't mean anything. They didn't load the mark. And by loading a mark, I mean they didn't give the mark meaning. If you want chip to mean something, something predictable and desirable must follow it. So if he really loves his ball and I say chip and I throw the ball, guess what? Real quick, he's going to associate chip with his ball. Or if he loves food and I say chip and I give him a piece of food, really quickly he's going to make that association. And chip, I should say, is always going to mean something really great is coming. For those of you wondering where I got chip, I heard some Czech traders using it like 6 years ago, and I said, you know what, I like that a lot better than yes, because yes is what I was using before. I don't like clickers, and the reason I don't like clickers is one more thing to carry. I already got enough things to carry. So the less things I can use with my hands, the better, the less things that I have to feed in the future. So for me, I can always say chip and feed the dog or reward the dog with a toy. One more thing on chip. If my dog doesn't like food, or if my dog doesn't like toys, there's no point to say chip and give something that the dog doesn't like. The dog decides what's desirable. If he doesn't care for food or for toys, I'm not using chip. Okay guys, one thing I forgot to mention on the chip marker in the original video that I really need to get across to you guys. It is a terminal marker. That means when the animal hears chip, they can break the behavior in order to obtain the reward. And this is important because sometimes I reward away from the dog and the dog actually leaves the behavior, comes to me for the reward. So, and there are occasions under which I do this. So, if you want to reward your dog but have your dog stay in behavior, we are going to have a module on that where we talk about how to do that. But suffice to say, if we're saying chip, it is a terminal marker. It means that the dog can stop doing whatever it is that he or she's doing. If you want them to resume the behavior, you must give the command again or reinitiate the behavior with whatever aids you're using. So chip is a terminal marker. Now good, okay? Good is an affirmation to the dog. So chip is really for functional rewards. If I have something to give to the dog, whether it's food or whether it's a toy, it's something tangible, it's something functional, I'm giving it to the dog. But of course, there are occasions, and then there are also some dogs who either don't value tangible rewards, or like I said, there's some occasions where I won't have a tangible reward, in which case I'm going to use good. Okay? And I put it with a lot of extra O's just to get it in your mind. Don't just say good and hope that the dog kind of understands what you're saying. Good, good boy. Usually, depending on whether I'm trying to make the dog excited or not, depends on the tone of voice I'm using when I'm saying this, right? So if I want to kind of bring the dog up a little bit, I'll probably be a little bit higher pitched, a little more excited. Good boy, good, 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 good. And this is going to bring the dog up emotionally. If I want the dog to calm and stabilize in the behavior, I might be a little bit more calm. Good, good. But basically, this is an affirmation to the dog that what you're doing is good. Keep on doing it. And that's really, really important. People undervalue how essential praise is to the relationship and to the training process with the dog. There are a lot of dogs that I've met that don't have all that much food drive, that don't have all that much toy drive, but when you praise them and you praise them properly, that tail gets going and they derive a lot of satisfaction and happiness from that. A marker, kind of just to generally let the dog know, I like what you do and keep doing it, is important. So chip is a food or toy delivery. Good is just an affirmation to the dog. All right? Now, punishment. Okay? For me, I have two verbal punishers. Okay? And I'll explain the difference quickly. No is my big one. That's the one I use when the dog really screws up. And I usually reserve this for bad behavior. Right? My dog barks at somebody, my dog jumps on somebody, my dog goes in the garbage, right? No! I identify that behavior, and just like with chip, I don't let myself become a liar immediately. No! I have to go and follow up and make an aversive consequence when the dog hears this, right? If I just say no and I don't do anything, very quickly the power of no goes away. And that's why you see so many people, no, 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 they say to their dog, and their dog's just like, whatever, doesn't mean anything to me. No only means what you make it mean, okay? So, and the way I say it, you see how I wrote it here? No! That's how I say it. There's this weird misconception in dog training that you can't use emotion. Now, don't get me wrong. There's times when the use of emotion in your training is counterproductive. But a lot of the time, using your emotion, whether it's a positive emotion or negative emotion, really aids in the communication with the dog. Good boy, good job, I really like that. No, I don't like that. Dogs are social creatures. They're naturally in tune with our emotions because that's part of the biological imperative that they have in order to survive, in order to coexist with us, right? So using your emotions in training is never a bad thing. As long as, of course, you're somebody that is in control of your emotions and you're aware of your emotions, how your emotions are impacting what you're saying, what you're doing with your dog. If you're maybe a little bit, need to work on some things, then maybe, yes, be careful with your emotions. But I find a lot of people, they don't communicate emotionally enough with the dog. The dog does something really bad and they're just like, no, right? No, let the dog hear you. He's barking at other dogs. He's being aggressive. He's being leash reactive. No! Let him know. I don't like that. It means something. You know how many dogs come in here and they've never really been meaningfully told no. They might have heard the word, but they've never heard the word, if you know what I mean. And they try to be aggressive the first day they come here. And we say, no! And they're like, really? You mean I'm not allowed to do that? No, nobody ever said anything. Really? It's like, basically that's analogous. That's the analogous kind of conversation that we have with the two-way communication. So no helps to identify for the dog the specific behavior that you really hate and that he or she must stop performing. I also have Now again, I know my writing is difficult to read, so bear with me. For me is a soft no, so to speak. So I usually reserve this when I'm obedience training. Okay, so if I ask the dog to sit or to down, and let's say, I don't know, my dog broke the down. All right, she was in a down, and then she got up from the down. I'll just be like, down, and maybe I'll put the dog back down. There isn't a physical punishment that follows that generally for me. For me, it's generally I'll just create that negative reinforcement, guide the dog with a little bit of pressure back into the desired behavior. So the dog gets up from the down, down, and I'll put the dog back into the downs. A lot of the time, again, once the dog if you're being consistent in the application of your markers, your dog will hear and immediately fix his or herself, okay? Hey guys, let's talk about the break signal. Now, I call it a signal because it's a little bit different than the markers, all right? For me, the markers are communication to create a specific behavior or to remove a specific behavior. Break is a little bit different in that it signals to the dog that he or she can stop doing whatever it is that you've asked him or her to do. But the reason I included it in the markers and didn't just make it like it's another command is because it has more importance than just a command like sit, down, heel, or whatever. Break actually has an emotional value to the dog. When you use it properly, and you're going to see in our training modules how we use it, you can actually reward the dog by breaking the dog. So whether you're in a situation where you don't have food or toys, or maybe the dog's a little bit down, or maybe you're in a situation where the highest value thing around for your dog is freedom, that break signal becomes really important. It's what allows you to reward the dog in the most meaningful way in that specific situation. Or maybe just for that dog in that training situation, you want to use it as a functional reward because it's going to help you more than giving food, giving toy, giving praise or whatever. So for me, break is more than just a command. It's not quite a marker. I call it the break signal. There is nothing really that we train the dogs to do in our functional obedience training that doesn't include an implied state. That means you have to keep doing this behavior until we give you a signal that you can stop. Dogs don't do well with shades of gray. All right, and I'm going to get more into this in depth later on, but suffice to say that every command we teach has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the break signal is the end. Okay, so if I ask my dog to down, The beginning is down. The middle is the dog in the down, and the end is me saying break, and that means that you're free. Now, of course, if I say chip, because I'm rewarding with food or a toy, well, now chip is the terminal marker. The dog can get up on the chip if he or she so chooses. But sometimes when you're training, you'll even say chip, and the dog's so used to being rewarded in the position that they'll hold the position. Again, a topic for another day. And you have to actually say break so that the dog gets up. And a lot of the time when you're just out and about with your dogs, especially later on when your training maybe is done and you're just out and about with your dog, you need a way to tell your dog, hey, okay, you can stop, right? My dogs are in heel, I say break, and they leave, and they run off and they go smell the daisies or whatever it is that they want to do. So, I hope this helps you guys. This quick rundown, the 4 phases of training, the markers that we use here, positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. I hope this is all percolating so that when you actually see me training the dogs and you actually start training the dogs, you understand the means behind the method. You're not just mindlessly, using a leash or giving the dog hot dogs or throwing balls. You know why it is that you're doing what it is that you're doing.